Hello guys, and I got another tutorial for you. This is more like guidelines, actually, not necessarily a tutorial, but it's going to be how to achieve realism in Vue. And the funny thing about Vue is that you can have it do whatever you want. You can have it make a really good scene, you can have it make a really bad scene, whatever you want, really. The point I'm trying to make is that you're only going to get so much out of it that you put into it. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. The less you put into it, the less you're going to get out of it, so on and so forth. Given that information, of course, the more you put into Vue, the longer your render times and the longer you'll wait till you see your final outcome. But I am here to help you alleviate that problem by giving you a basic rundown of how I put scenes together while trying to achieve realism inside of Vue. So, to start, you just, like anyone else, including me, you have your basic scene set up. I have this one set up. I manually set this scene up and saved it as my default scene, and you can do that by going to File, Options, and then in here, you set the scene up however you want, and then you just set Save Default Scene. And the only thing I did was I changed the aspect ratio, and I put in a custom atmosphere that I like to use for general purposes. So that's all I did. Then I clicked save for the default scene, and that was it. When I open up Vue and start a scene, I actually visually plan it beforehand, before I actually put it into Vue, and then I try my best to replicate what I have on paper inside of Vue. So what I want to do right now is make a forest, and it's going to be just a simple forest, not going to be anything dramatic or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a standard terrain, and pardon my standard terrain, when it comes out and I load it into the scene, it comes out all goofy because I was messing with it one time and I don't know what happened. It ended up saving itself like this, and I don't know how. I didn't do anything with it or save anything to make it come up like this. But to alleviate that problem, all I'm going to do is just flatten it out, and I'm going to load this, not this, this. And the reason why I'm going to load this one is because for some reason this is the only one that it'll work with. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm just going to flatten it. There you go. Problem solved. Now the next problem is that this is way too bright of an atmosphere. So what I have to do is I have to lower it. The sky dome lighting gain. I'm going to lower it down to about 2. And now you can see the different details in there. I'm also going to make this 0. Alright. Next thing I'm going to do with this terrain is I'm going to load up a material that ships with Vue. I'm only going to use materials that ship with Vue in this video, so you guys can follow along fairly easily. And what I want to do is have a nice rocky, grassy material, but this doesn't look very good, and I like the way the dry grass looks, so I'm going to go with that. And I'm going to lower the scale to about, I want to say 0.5. There we go. And I'm going to lower the, I'm going to keep the bump where it's at, but I'm going to change the color. I'm going to just desaturate it and darken it just a little bit. There we go. I'm also going to just make it more of this orangey brown color. Oh, man, that's too much. Okay, now I gotta reload it. 0.5. Color. What we can do is we can copy this color. You just right click on the swatch right here, go to copy, just lower the brightness a little bit, and then lower the saturation. Okay, it's a little too dark. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna leave it like that and click OK. And the next thing is I'm going to make an ecosystem. So I'm just going to click on the ecosystem here. I'm going to load up the tree that I want to use, and you have to be careful with the trees you use. Most of these trees, I'm pretty sure that most of these trees ship with Vue no matter what version you're using, but I could be wrong, so don't quote me. But I'm going to be using the HD Lark tree. It's a high polygon tree, so you have to be careful when loading it in. It could take a long time to populate and load. When you do load up the tree down here, it should have a bar saying that Vue's thinking about it and is going to load it in. When it's done, you'll see it in here. And what I like to do, just a general rule of thumb, is to take the density immediately down to about 5 or 10%. And the reason for that is because most of the time, at 50%, in my situations anyways, I find that that's too much to start with while you're just trying to figure things out. The more you go on, the more you know what you want to do, the more you can put in. So I'm just going to lower it down immediately. The next thing I want to do is offset where the trees populate by negative 0.5. I have this in feet. Vue's measuring it in feet for me. I used meters for a long time. I'm just trying out feet just because I'm from the United States and it makes sense to me. But you can do it in meters, you can do it in feet, whichever one you want to do. And then hit populate. And now with the density set to 10%, you can see that 1,031 instances have been created. And the reason why I lowered the absolute offset from the surface is just so it looks like the roots are going into the ground and not just sitting on top of the terrain level, is all that really is for. So you don't have to do that, but I do it just because it adds a little bit of more realism to the trees. The next thing I want to do is I want to change the variation of the scale of the trees. So there's already a variation. If you set this at 1 and you have the maximum size variation set to 1, more or less all the trees are going to be uniform in size. There's going to be smaller ones here and there just because of the way the plant was made, but you want to be able to set a larger amount or a lower amount depending on what you want. So I want the trees to populate at a larger size than just 1.0. So I'm going to raise the maximum size variation to 1.3 because in nature, not every plant, even grass after it's been cut, is never really the same length as all the other blades of grass or trees. So I'm going to do that and just repopulate. A few instances went away just because we have bigger trees. That's normal, so don't worry about that. The next thing we want to do is just take a quick render at it and see what we have going on. So I'm just going to zoom in here and see what kind of trees are populating. I'm going to do it at final and go. Alright, and this is what it looks like so far. This is a good starting point. The material we have on the ground, you can see the variations in the coloration, and that looks good. Like this actually looks like rock material rather than plant, because you can see the darker patches of grass and the lighter, and then you have like this light off material that kind of looks like a rock. But that looks good. The trees, you can see the variation in size in the trees. But there are a few things wrong with this. First of all, there's not enough trees. And second of all the trees are exactly the same color, and there's only one type of tree. In nature, you would typically find numerous types of trees, all different shapes, all different sizes, all different colors. And there's an easy way to alleviate that problem. The way you do it is inside of the ecosystem that you created with the tree, or that I created anyways. You can go to the density. First of all, you can bump that up, but we're not going to do that just yet. We're actually going to go to the color, and we're going to take this color and we're going to desaturate it. And the reason why I'm going to desaturate it is because this tree right here is actually way saturated. I have never once seen a tree that was so saturated that you can actually tell if it was green. Even blue spruce is like a grayish green color. So, at least where I live. So, I'm going to lower the saturation, gives it more of a natural look. Then I'm going to use variable color. And what you want to do is you want to go inside the function editor by just, when you enable it by clicking on the checkbox, you just want to right click and go to edit function. Delete those right off. Next, load up your fractal. Then connect it to the color tab. After that, connect the color map and edit your fractal. I'm just going to put with rotation on there. Gives it more of a rotating feel on the fractal, more swishing, I believe. Then I'm just going to lower the largest scale, bump the gain up, and even the roughness. And load up the fields color map, hit OK, then you have to repopulate. Now you can see that there are a lot of yellow and green and orange trees out there now. That might be too much. So what we want to do is go back to our fractal and just raise the largest feature, hit OK, and repopulate. And now we don't have nearly as many orange and yellow and red trees, but on the other hand, they are more grouped together, and that's just because of how the fractal was made. So you can see here that you have this big patch that's different colors right here, where this is all the same, and that's good. That's what I'm looking for. That is exactly what I'm looking for. So that looks good. And you can change the influence of variable color. 100% means that this is taking control of all of it, or you can change it to about 50-50, repopulate, and maybe now the influence isn't nearly as strong. So that's another thing we can do. That helps us so we don't have to add another tree, the same tree, just a different color, adding more polygons to the scene. Because if you look down here, we already have almost 230,000 or million polygons. So it's not a lot, but we want to keep the count down as much as possible. Next thing we want to do is we are going to add another tree, but we're actually going to add a dead tree that looks similar to the lark tree, which is this winter tree H that I find is really good. So we're just going to load that up. We're going to give it the same size variation. Actually, you know what? We've got to do this a different way. We don't have to, but I would like to. Instead of doing it on the same ecosystem, click on your dry grass and make another ecosystem. Then reload it. And then in here, just change your scaling to be the same, your density to be the same, so about 10%. The color doesn't really matter here because it's already kind of dark and saturated or desaturated, but I do want to lighten it up just a little bit because I don't want it too dark. And then populate that. But there is one thing I do want to do with this, and that is the density. I want variable density, and we're just going to do the same thing. Go in here, we're going to keep this, just add another fractal here, connect it to the density, and then I would keep it just as a simple fractal and just lower the largest feature, raise the gain a little bit and the roughness, and click OK. And if you watch the instances, it may go up or go down, and look like they went down. So not that much of an influence. We also want decay near foreign objects to be kind of down as well. So we can go in here, raise the largest feature, raise this all the way, raise this. We could even raise the meta scale. We'll see what that does. That added more, but it added them in a fractal fashion, so they're not all just together in one area. They actually do these swooping lines like right here with the color and everything. So we'll try this and see how this works. Populate that, and then we have less, but if we go in here, you can see how so far they're almost in a swirling pattern right here with the colors and the way they um, have been brought together and populated. So that looks good. But now that we have the mixture of different colored trees and dead trees, we have to go to our original tree, this one, and we have to raise the density to about 50. We're going to go to 50. That's the next point that we want to go to. That might be enough. We'll find out. Let's raise this to about 15. Populate it. Click OK. And then let's set the lighting up a little bit so we can see what we have better. I'm going to raise the gain to about 0.5. Keep that there. I'm going to lower this to about 75. Click OK. I'm going to bring the camera down and slightly more up than that. And the light, I'm just going to have on this side of the camera and just play with it a little bit to find out where the best lighting comes from. We'll try this and render. Alright, so you can see we've got our dead trees, we have our green trees, we have our discolored trees, other colored trees, and they're not all in a linear fashion. They're not all the same color, they're not all the same size, they're not all the same shape. We have different trees, we have different variations. Even our ground right here has different color and variations. We don't have any small ground cover here. That's totally fine. From an higher shot like this going down into the forest, I don't think we're going to need it. But if we're closer down to eye level, I'm 6'4". At that height, then maybe I'd want to put some in. But I'm not. I'll just stay up here looking down here, which looks pretty good. So one thing I did notice, looking at this tree right here, this dead one, I'm noticing that I didn't take the root system down into the ground like I did with the other ones. So that's the kind of small detail that you have to notice. You have to be very careful. So negative 0.5 and populate. And now that takes some of them away, so we have to repopulate maybe with 20%. Now we're back to the original amount. But their root system should more or less be down in the ground, or at least look like, you know, they're actually root systems that should be in the ground anyways. So that's the first thing that you want to do when you make an ecosystem. You want to make sure that it's not all linear, it's not all the same. You want to make sure that some plants grow at higher altitudes and some don't. And when you actually go and load up a plant inside Vue, it tells you, in most of these anyways, maybe not all of them, but in the majority of them, it'll actually tell you whether or not it's a high definition plant, or if it grows at higher or lower altitudes. And once Vue's done being ridiculous and wants to work with me, then we'll be able to do something about it. But it doesn't look like it's wanting to work for some reason. So anyways, we'll get on with the tutorial here. The next thing you want to do is have a good atmosphere. And since we're not looking up, into the sky, we don't have to worry about clouds or even lighting too much. But there are a few things that you can do to get really good lighting on trees and the ground. The main thing you want to do is, if you want a daytime shot, make sure you keep the sun up in the sky pretty high. This isn't high enough. You might want to go up here. This will be better for daytime shots, especially if you're looking down into your scene. Have the sun high. The lower the altitude, the more of that decay amount you're going to get, and you're going to get more like a sunset or sunrise over a daytime. So what I have done is I made an atmosphere, and this is so easy to make. Oh yeah, and here's the trees. This one, it tells you 20 to 40 meters tall is how it usually grows. Is how tall it usually grows. Where it grows. Tells you the polygon size. This one doesn't necessarily tell you how high or low it goes, but in atmosphere or not in altitude. But that's beyond the fact now. So I have made one that is available for free, and I'll show you how I made it, just because I made it inside of Vue using Vue resources. Insane times sunset. And this sun is so close to the ground, or it should be anyways. It's supposed to be, there it is. It's supposed to be right before or even after the horizon or the ground level. And just so I can render faster, I'll lower that. There we go. And let's start higher. And we'll work our way down. So this is a very dark atmosphere. It can be used as a bright atmosphere too. And the way I made this is I just loaded this physical and the dusk atmosphere, and I went in and I edited it saying that it's global radiosity. Now you can see all that extra light coming into the scene, that reflective light. I raised it. I can't remember how much I did, but I typically go to 0.5 to begin with. I also raised the sky dome lighting gain to about 4. I made this a little lighter. I also made it an orangish color as well. It's about right there. A little less saturated than that. I bumped this shadow smoothing up quite a bit, almost 100, not necessarily. Then I changed this to be about 90, and this I took all the way up. And then I lowered the quality boost to 1.5. That's just for testing purposes. I then took the aerial perspective and I raised that to about 2, I believe, and changed this to a volumetric light. And that's how I made that. Right now it's not looking like the way I made it, because I adjusted a few things like this sky ground density and the decay amount. I changed just slightly. I'm going to change this slightly still to about 60, because it's a little bit too orange. And what you want is a good balance between blue and the yellow orange color, or if you have any other color. You want the sky to be blue, and you want the objects in your scene to take upon that decay color, rather than the opposite, where you want your sky is orange and your objects are orange. You want there to be a blue sky, at least almost until the sun's almost gone. I'm going to raise this to about 1. We'll see how bright that gets after I raise it. So that's pretty bright. I'm also going to raise this to 1 as well. And I'm going to lower this a little bit more to about 45%. Next, I'm going to raise the glow amount to 100%. You can see where the sun is now glowing into the scene. And you can see with all that glow, we get this sky dome lighting gain right here in the corner. It doesn't look good. All you have to do is just lower this. That might be a little bit too much anyways. And then you'll see that is now going away. That still may be a little bit too much, so we'll go to 1. And this color will change automatically once you start playing with the sky attributes. This color will change automatically, and if you want it to go back, you just take it back. There we go. That might be a better color than that greenish color we had, because then we can raise this even more and we won't have that nasty green color. There we go. And just for the sake of this tutorial and to see what else we come up with, let's lower this down to 75 again. We get a little more ambient light. Okay, that's too much ambient light. 85. That's still a little bit too much. We'll go back to 90 and keep it there. The next thing you want to do is make sure that your sun is in a relatively good place. And with it being bright like that, with that glow, if you look at it directly with the camera, it looks horrible. So we want our sunlight, I want it to stay there, but I want to bring it up just a little bit more. And I'll look back down onto the plants. And there's that yellow tint that I've seen many times walking up the mountains and looking down into the valley. Lower the sky dome lighting gain even more because now it's extra bright now that I raised it. There we go. Next thing is that in my studies inside of Vue with the scattering anisotropy, I found that anything from 0.6 to almost 0.85 is a more realistic number. So as you can see right here, when I play with it, the sunlight goes more directly towards the sun rather than the camera if I raise this. So if I raise it all the way to 1.0, you see there's no light hitting any of these plants down here. But if I lower it to 0.6, there is a lot of light that comes down and hits those plants, hits the camera. And we don't necessarily want that. We want there to be enough balance between light and dark, light hitting the camera and light not hitting the camera, so that there's a realistic look. So we know that 100% is way too much, and just as a general rule, I try not to go above 0.85 because I've noticed that that doesn't necessarily give me the best results. So I'm just going to go straight to 0.85. And you can see even 0.85 is giving me too dark of a result. So I'm just going to go back to 0.8, which is what I liked it most at. And there we go. It looks good, plus it looks real enough with how much time I put into it. Definitely looks real enough. The next thing is we're going to want to copy this haze color. And the reason why I say that is because if we mess up on the haze color, we can always cut and paste, or copy and paste. Or if you just copy it now, just paste later. What I want to do is I'm going to lower this down to be very dark. 30, 30, 30. You can just copy those down. And then hit OK. And what that does is now the haze is super dark, but there's too much haze. I don't want that much haze, so I'm going to lower it down to 5, and you'll see that some of that light is now coming back into the scene. That's good. We want some of that light. And this is also too high. We don't want it that high. But we don't want it so bright that it looks fake. And it looked good, it looked cool the way it did before, but it looked too fake. So I'm lowering the haze to bring in the light that we had before. And if we have to, we can always lighten it up as well. It's almost the same color as the fog. Alright, next, with the fog, I'm just going to keep it the same. I'm going to change this value to 200% for the glow intensity. Now you can see some of that light coming in over there. I might even go up to 300. We'll see how that looks. 300, you can see some of that glow coming in still. Then I'm going to, this will be a good time to save it. So you can just right click on this icon right here, find a spot to save it, and call it whatever you want. I'm going to call mine Forest. If I can type Forest and save. Say yes. If that comes up, you can say yes or no. It doesn't really matter. All it's asking is if it wants to save the data so I can resume my render later. And I'm already going off of the preview here. I can see that there's a lot of shadow. And the light's hitting the top of the trees and the sides just fine, but there's too much darkness in between the trees. So I'm going to raise the sky dome lighting gain. And you gotta play with this a lot throughout the entire time you're playing with Vue. It's gonna be something that you play with quite a bit because lighting is essential if you want a realistic looking scene. And I want that yellowish gold orange color back that I like so much. About right here, go down, bring it down okay. That just gives us a nice orange glow down in the between the trees. Now it's too bright, so we're gonna lower it down to maybe 3. Alright, and that might be enough. Let's go ahead and lower this down to maybe 86. Nope, too much. 88. And lower this down to about 6.6. Okay. I'm going to lower that down a little bit more too. Okay, now save one more time. I'm just going to hit yes and render. And it looks like we have too much light coming in. Too much sky dome lighting gain, although the shadows aren't nearly as black as they were. You can still see where the sun comes in through the trees and hits, so that's good. You can see the difference between light and dark. There's just still too much light coming in, even on the top. That and the trees themselves, I'm using the final render quality, so they're coming out to be way too sharp. That can be fixed, obviously. There's a workaround for that. But there's just too much light. So I'm going to go in and we're just going to bring this up to about 94 and re-render. Alright, and as I can see here, that light is just not working for me. I kind of want a more realistic but artistic feel other than just the bland color that I have going on. So, in the atmosphere tab, I'm going to change the overall skylight color to this bluish color, and I've tried this before. We'll see if this works. Hit OK. And then I'm going to change the ambient color to be this darker blue as well. And hit OK. And hopefully, with that being said, if I raise this, all that dark spot and all those dark places in there should fill in with this blue color, and that'll give it a more artistic feel, but it'll still be realistic, if you know what I mean. I'm going to make this a little bit more saturated and a little more dark. There we go. And I'm going to make this a little more dark as well, and change it to be catered more towards ambient, and we'll see how that turns out. And as you can see, that's too much. So 88%. Lower this down to about 7. Lower it even more. 6. 5. See, lighting is key. You just got to keep working at it until you find something that's right. We'll call it good right there, and I'm just going to move the sun around to the side here. And I'm going to drop it down. It's a little bit more dark at that point. Maybe I need it more bright. So I'm going to raise it. Oh, there we go. Then I'm also going to give about 5 to 6 degree softness to the sun. Those harsh shadow edges that you get from doing CG are totally not realistic. So in the sunlight, you have this softness option right here. Granted, sometimes having sharp shadows makes sense, but it's always a good habit to give 1, 2, or maybe 3 degrees softness to your shadows. Just as a rule of thumb, or a guideline, I guess you could call it. It's just a good habit to get into. That way you know it's there and you know that you can control it. Even if you don't necessarily want to use it, just go in there and just change it, and then play with it with the scene. And then at the end, if you don't like it, just take it off. But at least practice using it, because you might never know when you're going to have to use it. This again looks good. Don't have to worry about anything in there. Let's go ahead and do another preview render. Alright, yeah, that looks much better. Now we have good light coming in, and we have the separation of the shadows from the trees, and they're not harsh lines that you would get from working in a CG program. So that looks much better. Very well lit, in my opinion. Natural lighting. Next thing I want to do is bump up maybe the aerial perspective just a little bit more. The reason why I want to do that is because there's not enough of that distance, that draw distance in there that makes me say, oh, that this line of trees right here is in the back and this one is closer and whatever. So I'm going to raise it to 5 and we're going to see how much that changes it. And that might change it too much, so I'm going to change it to 4 and click OK, and then do another render. And that looks good. Alright, so given what we have here now, I'd say the last thing that we would have to do is play around with the quality settings. So with that aerial perspective, what we did is it's amplified the options that we have inside the atmosphere tab there, and you can see these bluing glower areas over here and over here, but as it gets closer to the camera, it's not as pronounced. So that gives us a little bit more of a depth of field, I guess, not a blurred depth of field, but it gives us more of a draw, I guess I want to say. Draws are, we can tell that this is over in the distance and this is closer. So that's what it's supposed to imitate, and it does it rather well. So this is now done. The next thing that we're going to want to do is go into the quality boost tabs, and I'm just going to raise this to 0. I don't want to go any higher. I'm going to raise this to about 2. That should be plenty for that. I'm just going to check God rays. It won't do anything in particular because the atmosphere is not even set up to take advantage of it. But you never know what you might find. So that'll be that. So before we do this final render, and I show you what it looks like in the end with the higher quality settings and better anti-aliasing on the render settings, let's just recap on what we've done in our workflow to get a more natural look in our environment. So the first thing we did is, I don't want to move that. The first thing we did is we made a standard terrain. The reason why we use a standard terrain is because it's very easy and cheap to render, and we're not even looking at it mostly anyways. It's all most of it's covered in trees, and we have a really good material on it that we can use. Next, we then put a base material on that terrain that kind of simulated dry grass in patchy areas. We played with the scale a little bit to match what we want. We also changed the color to a more natural color that we would find in nature. After that, we added our first tree. That tree was the green tree that we had. It was mostly unified, so we changed the scale of it to have a variation of 1.3. So there'll be trees from 1.3 down to 1.0, and then just with the way the tree was made, there's going to be smaller variations in there as well. But now we have more variation. Then made it go negative 0.5 feet below the surface, just so those roots on the trees will be in the ground where they're supposed to be, and not just sitting on top. Hopefully, anyways. It's really hard to tell from this distance, but I'm pretty sure that the majority of them will at least be in the ground. After that, we then took a color node and we attached it to a fractal node, and we colored that one tree, which was all green, and gave them a variation of orange, red, green, and yellow. And we drive that through this function throughout the entire scene, so it's more colored naturally, so we get more variation in color, but it's not unified, and we don't have to load in another set of trees and raise our polygon count more than we have to. After that, we raised a dead tree into the scene. And we drove the density with a variable density function here. So now it's only being populated in areas driven by this instead of just all over the scene, causing further polygon counts to go up when we don't need them to. After that, we played with the lighting to get a more natural early morning sunrise. It's rising from the east, so this is east, this is west, north, south. So the sun is rising, giving us a nice sunrise look on the trees, and we have good lighting. Now the next thing that I want to do is go to the atmosphere tab, and I want to make it a cool morning. So what we can do, and this is something that you can do inside of Vue, you don't have to have any special downloads or anything. You can create your own fog, and how you do that is you just load up the big cumulus cloud here, click OK. And I've done this before too. I have done this, but that doesn't always work. So just bear in mind that although we can probably get it to work, it just doesn't always work. You drag it all the way down, lower the size to be as thin as you can, and lower it even more. We'll see if this goes through. And it looks like, since I can't lower the cloud, oh, I guess I can. Okay, cool. I'll lower it down till it almost hits the bottom. Not necessarily all the way, just barely. And now you can see that there's now fog in there. But when you do a render, you'll see that it's too thick. It comes in too thick. So we'll fix that here in a minute. And I just want this to be about the same size as the canopy here. There we go. That might look a little bit better. Yes, that gives us more of the clouds. But now it just looks like trees that are popping up above the cloud line. So what we have to do is we have to go to the atmosphere editor, and we're going to change the density from 108% to about 10%. And you're gonna look at it and you're gonna say, oh my gosh, it all went away. It's not there, but it's still there. Trust me. If you do a render right now, it'll still take forever to render. It's just very thin. It's not very dense. So we're just gonna raise the opacity. And raising the opacity should, in theory, give it a more foggy look, more full look without having it to be too dense. You can see right here it's slowly updating, but even raising the opacity the way I didn't even change it to what we need it. So 10% is still too much, so let's try 30%. Alright, that's a little bit better. I can start seeing it coming in. Alright, that might be good. That might be all we need. I'm going to change this down to be about 67%. Sharpness I'm going to bring down to about 10. Feathers I'm also going to bring down to about 65. The detail amount I'm going to bring down to about 30. Altitude variations I'm actually going to bring up just slightly. Ambient light I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to lower the shadow density to about 12 or 13, somewhere around there. I'm also going to raise the scale by 10. And there we go. Now the next thing to do is save it. And render it out one more time and take a look. Awesome. It just looks awesome. So put that cloud layer in. Now we have like this little bit of fog here, and it's mostly up here and not down here, though it is populated over here a little bit. You can see just small portions of it as it fades in, and even right there, but that's alright. It could just be fog creeping in over here. We can throw it inside of Photoshop and make it more dramatic and whatnot. If you look closely right here and inside the shadows, I have too much of a smoothness going on. The shadows alone look fine until they start grouping together and they start getting a little bit more noisy. I can also raise the quality slider so that goes away, but I'm just going to lower the smoothness on it, and I'm going to call it good. I'm going to render out one final render, and I'll post it on my Facebook and DeviantArt page. You can see it there, but I think this pretty much draws an end to the video. So we built the scene from the ground up using basic materials and basic natural knowledge of how things work in nature to make a scene, and pretty soon, another month from here, where I live, this is how the hillsides are going to look. They're going to be covered in fog. There's going to be some orange and red and yellow leaves populating on the trees, and they're going to be mixed up with some green trees. There's going to be some dead ones, so on and so forth. So this is a very basic scene with basic workflow on how to achieve a realistic look inside a view. All it takes now is to get some good render settings in to take this harsh line out, or sharpness of the scene out, make it a little bit more soft, fix up these shadows a little bit, make it more dramatic. We can have something that looks very realistic yet very artistic at the same time. So I hope this video has helped you. I'm gonna try posting more videos as often as possible, just things that people have brought to my attention that they want to see, and this was a request, so hopefully the person who I'm talking about knows who they are. I hope I have helped them. So yeah, just let me know what else I can do for you guys. Thanks.